Hello, modest coders. My name is Shawn, and I will be your instructor today. Welcome to today's video in the Data Science and Machine Learning series, How to Read Data in CSV Files Using PANDAS. The only prerequisites to this are a basic knowledge of Python, which you can get from my Python for Beginners series. You also need to have watched all the previous videos in the series, which I have linked in the description box below for your convenience. So, if you've done that, without further ado, let's begin. CSV, or comma-separated value files, are a common file format for transferring and storing data. The ability to read, manipulate, and write data to and from CSV files using Python is a key skill to master for any data scientist or automation engineer. In this video, we'll go over what CSV files are, how to read CSV files into Pandas data frames, and the pros and cons of using CSV files. Before we get started, there's a file called cereal.csv that contains nutrition data on 80 cereals that you need to download beforehand. I have linked to the Jupyter Notebook and that file down in the description box below, so go ahead and download both of those things and you can follow along with me here. Now, the first step to working with comma-separated value, or CSV files, is understanding the concept of file types and file extensions. Data is stored on your computer in individual files, or containers, each with a different name. Each file contains data of different types. The internals of a Jupyter Notebook, which ends in .ipynb, is quite different from the internals of a Microsoft Word document. Computers determine how to read files using the file extension, which is the code that follows the dot in a file name. So a file name is typically in the form name.fileExtension. So some examples include project1.dlcx, which would be a Word document called project1. codingwithshawn.txt, which would be a text file named codingwithshawn, and linuxtux.jpg, which would be an image file of Linux's mascot Tux. Other well-known file types and extensions include XLSX for Excel spreadsheets, PDF for portable document format, and I'm sure you've done something with PDFs before, PNG for images, ZIP, which is a compressed file format, GIF or GIF, which is animation, MPEG for video, MP3 for music, and more. A CSV is a file with a .csv file extension, for example data.csv or superinformation.csv. The CSV in this case lets the computer know that the data contained in the file is in comma-separated value format, which we'll discuss below. File extensions are hidden by default on a lot of operating systems. The first step that any self-respecting engineer, software engineer, or any data scientist will do on a new computer is to ensure that file extensions are shown in their Explorer on Windows or Finder in Mac. And in the screenshot here, you can see where file extensions are located in Windows File Explorer. It'll be after the dot, and there's a whole column for type, and in that it'll have something file. And so in this case, it's IPYNB for Jupyter Notebook. So now let's get into the code. And again, you need to have downloaded cereal.csv for this to work. So before we run this, let's go through this together. So the first thing we do is load the pandas libraries with alias PD. And PD is basically just shortening pandas so that when we call pandas, we don't have to put the full form. And we've talked about this earlier. Now this line is where a lot of the magic happens. So this is actually fairly simple. df is the variable we're giving. And one of the things that I see some people sometimes get confused about is, do you have to name a data frame df? And the answer to that is no. You can name a data frame anything. You can name this df, you can name this cookie, apple, cereal, it doesn't really matter. Just any variable. Now here we're calling pandas using PD, and then we're using the function .readCSV, and this is the important part. This is a pandas inbuilt function which allows you to transfer a CSV file into a data frame. And then you just paste the name of the document. Now, you notice I've put cereal.csv like this, and I haven't put any path or anything like that. And the reason is that cereal.csv, if it's located in Jupyter Notebook, doesn't need to have the full path. Now, if it's not located in Jupyter Notebook and it's just on your workstation, then you wanted to include the full path. But if not, it's as easy as this. And now if I do run this, you'll notice that, and give it a second here, it doesn't work. And that's because I haven't put cereal.csv there. But if I go to my Jupyter Notebook, click upload, now it's added here. And if I run this again, you'll notice it works like a charm. And now this last line here, df.head, prints the first 5 lines. And .head is another inbuilt function which prints the first 5 lines. If we do df.tail, which is another function, it'll print the last 5 lines. So those are 2 very important functions you need to know. df.head, and oops, I put heel, and df.tail. So definitely do remember those. Those are some important things. Now let's talk about some possible parsing errors that you might encounter. The first is a file not found error. A file not found error is typically an issue with path setup, current directory, or file name confusion. And the file extension can play a big part here. Let's say that instead of naming it serial.csv, you actually named it serial.csa. In that case, you need to go back and rename it. Another possible parsing error is the Unicode decode error. And this is typically going to happen when you have non-standard characters. So there are a number of ways you can fix this, but the way that I normally do it, if I do ever get it, is opening it in Sublime Text, which is a software, and then resaving it with the encoding UTF-8. The third type of error, which is the least common one, is a C parser error. Now this is one that you're probably not going to get, but if you do, parse errors can be caused in unusual circumstances to do with your data format. So one of the things you can do, and the thing that most likely will fix it immediately, is to add the parameter engine equals Python to the read CSV function call. Okay, let's talk about some more advanced concepts. Now, there are some additional flexible parameters in the pandas read CSV function that are useful to have in your arsenal of data science techniques. The first is specifying data types. Now, as we mentioned before, CSV files do not have any type of information for the data. Data types are inferred through examination of the top rows of the file, which can often lead to errors. To manually specify the data types for different columns, the dtype parameter can be used with the dictionary of column names and data types to be applied. For example, the example there. And now if you're not understanding all of this, don't worry, we'll go through this in more detail. I just want you to get the basic idea here. Skipping and picking rows and columns from file. So there are 3 important ones here. The nRows parameter specifies how many rows from the top of CSV file to read, which is useful to take a sample of a large file without loading completely. The skip rows parameter allows you to specify rows to leave out, either at the start of a file, in which case you'd provide an int, or throughout the file, provide a list of row indices. Similarly, the useCalls parameter can be used to specify which columns in the data to read. There are a couple of different tokens that pandas will recognize as a missing value. Now, these missing values are one of the most important things with data frames, because a lot of times missing data will be represented in very weird ways. Like, for example, it might say just a really large number like 9999999, or it might just say 0 or something like that, and that can really confuse pandas. Now, there are a couple of different accepted values there are a couple of different tokens that pandas will recognize as a missing value, and they are listed here. And as we go on into this series, we will come into a lot of occasions where we come into a weird CSV that has missing data in a weird way that we'll need to fix, and you'll see how we can easily change that into nan or null. And that's definitely going to be one of the most interesting and cool parts of the series, so be sure to stick around. Now, here's an example of where you'd use a lot of your different parameters to load a CSV. In this case, we're using sep, which is going to be tab separated value file, quote char, which is a single quote allowed as a quote character, dtype, in this case again, we're changing the dtype in this case to an integer, useCalls, in this case we're loading only the 3 columns that are here, parse dates, and in this case we're just interpreting the birth date column as a date instead of, say what it could recognize it as, perhaps a rented integer or a float, possibly a string, etc. And then we have our skip rows parameter here, and in this case we're skipping the first 10 rows of whatever file this is. And then NA values. So this is what I was talking about earlier, and when you use the NA values parameter, you can specify what would count as NA. So in this case, a dot or 2 question marks. Now let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of the CSV file format. Now, you need to be aware of the pitfalls and issues you'll encounter as you load, store, and exchange data in the CSV file format. There are many pros. For example, the CSV format is universal and the data can be loaded with any software. CSV files are simple to understand and debug with the basic text editor, and CSV files are quick to create and load into memory before analysis. That said, there are a couple of cons you need to know. There is no data type information stored in the text file, as we talked about earlier, and all typing, like dates, int or float, and strings, are inferred from the data only. There is no formatting or layout information storable. Things like fonts, borders, column width settings, and more from Microsoft Excel, which was the format .xlsx, will be lost. File encodings can become a problem if there are non-ASCII compatible characters in text fields. And the CSV file format is inefficient. Numbers are stored as characters rather than binary values, which is rather wasteful. You will find, however, that your CSV file compresses well using zip compression. So, final thoughts. Although the CSV is one of the most common formats for storing data, there are other file types that the modern day data scientists must be familiar with. But you now have a good sense of how useful Pandas is when importing the CSV file, and conveniently, Pandas offers similar and equally handy functions to import Excel, SAS, and Stata files, to name a few. And we've reached the end. Congratulations on making it here. Today you learned a number of things, including a lot about the CSV file format and how to import CSV files into Pandas and make it into a data frame, as well as a lot of helpful parameters. Now, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment below on what you thought of this video. If you have any questions, concerns, or feedback, again, be sure to comment below so I can help you out. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in another video.